Hello, everybody here. So we're Claudia Riccardo. You can call me Rick also, I am. And first of all, before we begin, yes, we really are from the Italian government. We work for the Prime Minister Cabinet Office. And yes, we also get frustrated a lot at some of the services of the public administration.
We are also citizens.
But this is the good news: is we're gonna show you what we're trying to do to fix that, to address that, and also what you can do to help us get there, hopefully. So, hello, designers, developers. How many designers are here? Can I have a show of hands? Oh, a lot of designers.
More designers.
Do we also have developers?
I won.
Ah, interesting. Do we also have somebody who identifies as a non-binary here? That's amazing. I like that. I like that a lot. So, if you have interacted with public administration and their services, you're going to know, first of all, that we have a lot of them. We have more than 22,000 administrations, each of which has at least one service. Many of them have many more than one service. Think about the key central one, like IMSS or email. And the problem is that with such a complex environment, it's not easy to have a unique experience, right? But the services, like citizens typically don't care about how these organizations work within. They care about the service that they have.
Yes, because citizens interact with government through public services. So if this interaction doesn't work, the experience you have with the government will be bad, complicated, right? So if you go online actually and search for a website of your municipality or of a central administration, you find something like this, a very fragmented and not coherent situation. The fact is that actually, Italian digital services are uneven, fragmented, and the consequence is that they are impacting the citizen experience in a bad way. Also, there are some data that shows that actually the offer of digital services in Italy is quite good. It's quite good, and compared to Europe, actually, is good, because it's 79, and the average of Europe is also 79.6. But when it comes to the demand, so the users that finished an online form in a public administration website is just 40% of the users completed, far from the average of Europe. Why we have this? We have an aged population, we know it, that has low digital competencies. So our assumption is that in one point of view, we have citizens that doesn't comprehend, understand the digital services they are using. On the other hand, also, the services are not that easy to use. I mean, there are different cases where they have showed online queues, like at the post office, or accedi alla nuova area riservata, new forever, and ever, and ever, and ever. Or, for instance, so problems that are part of the UI, are part of the UX, there is no support. So the things you actually can see, and yes, I'm using again another iceberg image to do so, is that what you see is that is not accessible, the website, or is poor communicated. But when you go a little bit further, you can also see that, for instance, the code is obsolete, or there is no technical documentation, or there was a vendor lock-in, so the public administration couldn't change at one point the same vendor. So it's not just the surface. And what we actually are trying to do is, yes, better digital transformation. So try to change something, because we will have fewer workers because of aged population, and we need to provide simple, accessible, inclusive public services. But actually, technology is the answer, but what was the question? What was the question? So what are we actually doing? We are trying to balance the way we develop and we design things, the way we work, and the way people, citizens, experience what we deliver. Good news.
Yes, good news is we are trying to fix that. And that's why people like Claudia and me are here today, but are here in general in Rome. And this is because in 2016, a person came over, a visionary, called Diego Piacentini, who started what was the digital transformation team. And his idea was to come to the prime minister, who was a special commissioner, so with all the powers, and started to recruit people that were outside the public administration with a very strong skill set in research, content design, UI, UX, front-end, mobile, cloud, open source, you name it. And through that first experience, there was the need that came out in the public administration. And through this need, this special commissioner, which had a little limited time, 2 years of time, then these 2 years became 3, and became a department, and became what is today one of the main strategic direction for the recovery, the next generation EU, the PNRR for the Italian speakers here. That is leading the digital transformation of the country. And this is all great, right? I mean, we can hire people, designers, developers, or experts, but you can't just hire a way to the solution. Especially at the beginning, you have to think, we were just 20 people. And so we realized we couldn't run alone. It was not enough. And this is when the first ideas of expanding the reach, expanding them to communities of practice, and to creating Developers Italia and Designers Italia, the two initiatives, the two projects that we're talking about today. Because in the public administration you have, I would say in general, but in particular for the problems we were facing, you have a cycle of continuous modifications of the software, of the requirements of the law, and so you have the users. We really have to bring together the makers, the one that create the public software, and the choosers. And because also the choosers need to be enabled to have the skills to choose what is best, because most of the time is somebody who does not have digital skills necessarily. Maybe they have administration skills or other kind of skills, right? But then their choice will affect the citizens. So it's a more complicated problem. And so to bring them together, we have Developers Italia and Designers Italia. Where do these communities sit? They sit right at the core of the Italian government, between what is the presidency and AGIT, and under the supervision of the Ministry of Innovation and of the Digital Transformation Department. And we realize it's really a way and an opportunity to not only improve the technical situation, but within a community, within changes in interaction, improve the relationship between the institutions, the technical providers, whether they are inside the government or outside. You have to think 22,000 administration, from a little school in the countryside to the big ministry, I don't know, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Defense, and the citizens, the final users of all these services. We set out two principles for this. We wanted this to be open, and so open design and open source. We're going to see later a few reasons of why this is so important. But it is important now to mention, because once you start to have an open community, you can ask yourself the question of, okay, this is great, we're doing this internally, but how do we make sure we don't just speak to our own bubble? In other words, how do we get the best energy out of the country? How do we get the best energy out of the industry, the citizens? How do we allow and we enable all the hackers that exist, all the makers, the doers, the designers, the people that want to activate themselves to join us in this path of digital transformation? And this is what work with us. We start with a clear vision. We need to say always, what is the end goal? Why are you doing what you're doing, right? This is very basic. I heard that somewhere, some talk. And then you need to show that you can do things, and the ones who do get rewarded, and this is why we say open practices, open community. What does open mean in all this? It's like, is this the buzzword? No, we mean it because, for example, if somebody does a great contribution, we have a great example, for example, with the maintainer of our React kit. They get to own this piece of software. They get the credits out of that. If a company does a very good job, we want to give them credit. We want to not only say, yeah, you're part of the community, here's your badge. That doesn't work. You need to be part. You need to have some power, some control into what? Into the ecosystem if you collaborate and if you get there. So with that and with collaborative people, and of course extremely important, because we're dealing with public money, because that's the only way I know of that really creates a community. You want to have public interactions. You have to have channels. You have to have forums. You have to have a Slack channel. You have to have GitHub or GitLab, and all the issues need to happen in the open. If you start to do things behind closed doors, that's not a community. That's at best like a traditional company, but but you will never find the bonds that you need to make things happen. And then, if you make it happen, if this does not stay on paper, but it's actually implemented, and it is, we're going to see a bit later of a couple of examples, this you create what is an open ecosystem. And an open ecosystem is beneficial for all the participants of it, because when a part improves, it improves for all the others. And that's very much the beauty of it. So these are the principles. This was all in paper. And what was the result?
The results after 4 years are that we have a community of over 20,000 members. One of the guy that Riccardo was saying about that was building the React kit was part of some trainings, community gatherings, where we have invited 1,000 participants just in 2022. We have more than 300 free software solutions in the catalog for everybody, for public or for the private as well. And also, as Designers Italia, we will see it later, we provide tools, kits, and templates for really design the digital public services. So, developers and Designers Italia. Just to focus a little bit more on what they do. Designers Italia, in the design way, let's say, will like to have a positive impact on citizens, putting the citizen at the center, so human-centered design, but raising the awareness and trying to spread the design culture within all the different stakeholders that are part of the digital transformation of public services. So we have starting from the citizen at the center, the people that made the digital touch points, the civil servants, the providers of the public administration. So what we are trying to do is spreading the design culture within the public administration for simple, accessible, and inclusive public services. The strategy is more or less can be represented more or less like this. I mean, we do basically guidelines, also practical guidelines. So how to do things, for who? For civil servants and public administration, and for their suppliers. We have also methodological kits, so things that are more from my side, so the service design, co-creation tools. Or we have also the design system, so technological kits that help really the public administration get down to the build of services. The higher level of complexity of these building blocks are the templates. So municipality templates and school templates that are ready-made templates, open source, that a municipality can bring and customize for themselves. Yes, we follow also a design process, and just to do some examples about the design system that is composed by the UI kit, so the components, Bootstrap Italia, and the React kit that are actually development kits. The journey started in 2018, and the resources improved a lot, especially with the support of the community, of community members. We released few months ago also the Figma open kit and the new Bootstrap Italia. Another example is the end-to-end templates, as I was saying before, that were actually back in the days co-designed with people that was working as civil servant in the municipalities and with citizens. So there is also behind the simple template, the WordPress template, a study to make sure that the template of a city is coherent for all the different 7,900 cities in Italy, and schools as well.
Yep. But designing great services is the very first step, right? You have to design, but you also have to execute. And this is not going. And in the execution is where some of the projects actually die, actually fail. And it has to do with technical and technological excellence. It has to do also with the way that you create them. Because when you create them, if you really want to have a public service, you want to make use of have the best use of public funds. You want to ensure digital sustainability. What does this mean? It means all sorts of things. It means how you make things transparent. It means how do you ensure that you have vendor neutrality, what Claudia was saying before in the iceberg slide, right? Vendor lock-in is a major problem that we have, because if you can't switch your vendor, you can't ask your vendor, that's a situation of monopoly. You don't have resiliency, because what if something happens to this vendor, right? Italy has one very strong way to counter this. And it is through the use of open source, or as I like to say, of free software. And it is right in the law. That's the beauty of it. It's one of the few countries in Europe that has it, and has two laws. The first one says that any development that is funded with public money needs to be released as open source, and not just for the administrations, but for everybody to be able to use and to improve upon. And the second law says that any open source software will have precedence over other solutions, over proprietary solutions. Because this is the only way you can build a really independent administration. And these two values are the values that create the community of Developers Italia. And yes, as you might have guessed, also from how we addressed, Claudia is the designer here, and I'm the developer. We unveiled this.
The new.
Right?
Is the new.
Well, that was not a surprise.
I'm joking.
We want to build a collaborative and independent public administration that helps the country generate innovation by focusing on delivering services through secure, reusable, and excellent software solution. Very nice, but what does this mean in practice? It means these are the first two products that exist within the Developers Italia community or initiative. There is a software catalog, which is a completely decentralized place for home to all open source software that their creators believe might be useful for the public, but it might also be used for many other organizations, because let's face it, and needs of a public school are not different from the needs of a private school mostly, but also for complex organizations in general. And then everything that is related to developer experience. So how do you interact with public platforms? How do you make them better? How do you work with the documentation? How do you find SDKs? You find ways to, I don't know, integrate private digital identity. You have system for having an easier access to laws or to guidelines. That's not a PDF. All of this done on an open ecosystem, right? So GitHub on a platform where all the development happens in the open. This, through the years, today I understand is a little bit of a brief overview, of a brief menu. I really encourage you to go and check this out because it's there. It's been there for years. But it's really enabled. We saw it a lot during the pandemic, but in general, it enabled all hackers to come in and help and look at the data. I'm thinking about, for example, the vaccination data. Our country was one of the first ones to have the idea to publish the data there. And in general, it helps everybody. It's from everyone for everyone, really. There are maintainers. Anyone can join the Slack channels where development happens and so on. There is a lot of value for public administration. I'm going to go very briefly through that. There is, of course, direct savings. Again, improved experiences because anybody can participate. There is transparency. There is sovereignty, which is particularly important in these years. And there is, but if you take all of this together, what it is, this is really an industrial strategy. There is a study from the European Commission that says that gives really important macroeconomic details. It even goes as far as to say that €1 invested in open source software is at least €4 of GDP added to the country, or these quantities that you can take a picture of if you like. What this all means is that open source is here, and the communities that are around here are here to stay, because this is going to be the future, and this is going to be where all the investments are going to go. And with open source, everybody has an opportunity to get in and improve things and see things and through transparency promote what they do. And so since it's,
Or at least in a democratic way, if you want to be part of the change, you can ask or Google come partecipo.italia.it. Sorry, is in Italian, so for the foreign people, we are sorry, is in Italian. That has actually simplified the way you designers or developers could help us. Or if you are a designer, contribute building up the UI kit, the design kit that is in Figma right now. I wanted to ask actually how many of you designers or developers have helped an open source project? Have you ever? Do you believe in this kind of things? So if so, help us be part of the change. If you are a developer instead, you can take part while improving Bootstrap Italia or all the other projects that are available in Developers Italia. And this year, since the beginning, actually, Developers Italia is also supporting Oktoberfest. So Google Developers Italia and find a way to participate.
May I add one thing, Claudia?
Sure.
Just for the development, that's very interesting, because that is also for, of course, English speakers. All of our websites are English too, or as much as possible, but all the GitHub part it is. Bootstrap is a very great example, because here we actually managed to get this is a very nice example of give back. We managed to make the Bootstrap library even more accessible than mainstream Bootstrap. Right? So this is one of the ways in which, through public funding and through public work, you really can improve things for everybody, for other citizens, for companies, and so on. Mm-hmm. So even if you are not planning to work for digital agencies, which might be a good thing for you. No, I'm joking. I actually hope that you work a bit more, because we need skills. You can use these projects, and you can modify them and work on them. A lot of contribution to Bootstrap actually came from a Google Summer of Code that an Indian student did. So this is really beyond the pure public work. We're trying to build something that is excellent for everybody to use and to participate with.
That's it.
That's it. So
thank you.
I imagine.
All right, we have time for one question. Anybody? There, Abraham.
Hello?
Oh,
Should I?
you got anticipated. Wait, just.
Okay, so thank you very much for the very interesting talk. I think lots of countries may need such projects also, not only for the public administration office, but also to join the designers and developers, which is our topic of today's conference. I wonder, and also I have one question, is about how do you organize the works? Do you organize? Do you have any meetings, or you have the bucket for your tasks, what you want to solve, and also the developer collaboration, because I can imagine there are lots of people who would like to help, but they don't always have time, and you have to organize and have to try to get all the time and also the workforce together. So how did you do this?
You answer?
Yep. So I'm gonna answer you particularly for the development, but I think this is really extendable as an answer. And my answer is twofold. And the first part is, community is a great help, but it's not a blocker. Like, it's not an excuse for not doing your homework, right? If you want to develop, you still have to develop and put in the resources. Community can be a help to get there faster. And the second thing is open communication and planning in the open. So if you're an internal developer or used to just an internal in-person Scrum meeting, that's a problem. You want to do this in the open. We have, for example, for most projects, a GitHub project or an open Slack, and we coordinate there. Then again, with a wide spectrum, there's 1,000 repositories on GitHub, so you really have a wide spectrum also of governances. But this would be you coordinate by being transparent, being in the open, using issues for Oktoberfest. There are issues that are tagged as good first issue, Oktoberfest. So if you do this in the open and you don't expect the community to do your homework, you're great.
I will just add a small thing for designers. I think that in the design crowd, we should be more open and try to collaborate a little bit more, because we are very you don't understand if you work in the private sector, where I was coming from, but in the public, you really understand the power of it. So let's collaborate.
I'm gonna see you all at the next community call, right? I wait.
Go ahead, Bram.
Yes.
Last question.
Thank you for the presentation, amazing. And this subject hits home because I am a new citizen in this country, so I've been dealing with all of this craziness that's going on. But as Claudia, you were talking, I was, thinking about implementations, and you mentioned, the tools that you've been building, from guidelines, methodology kits, and all of this. My question is, are you looking at also this other layer, which is in this country is a thing, tech readiness? No, my neighbor could have a flip phone. My school, where my son goes to school, might not have the latest, laptop. So as you develop all these, solutions, my question is, are you also looking at the tech readiness of, the lower tier of the participants?
Hardware?
Yeah.
I didn't get that much of the question.
Yeah, the digital inclusivity.
Digital inclusivity.
Inclusivity, yeah, for non.
Okay.
So
for schools that might not have the latest technology to implement your templates, for example. How are you looking at this issue?
So this is a technological question from my point of view. So
it can be a technological question, it can be a design question.
So from the human-centered point of view, Italy asked all the websites of the public administration to be accessible. And actually, we are, European countries are also expanding this to private sector. So inclusion of all the different kinds of people to the access, but we are also talking about accessibility problems, right? The lack of technology, I think, is something more related with, access to software, and open source is the key, because if you have it, you can just rebuild it and maintain it. Or from the other point of view is a hardware problem.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting question, because in the public, we don't have the luxury of saying, no, you know, you're not in the core audience, sorry, go to the competition, right? Because we don't have any competition. Like, no matter how exotic the setup might be, there needs to be a way to support that. And this is taken in consideration. There is a few tools. What I want to say, though, is that what we have just presented today is where we are going. It is reality in some applications, some of the core ones, in the foundational part, like digital identity, for example. But it is not, unfortunately, on everything, right? So we know there are parts that are not, like, a big part, we couldn't present everything, but a big part that we overlooked, but is extremely important, is the cultural transformation that goes along a digital transformation. Because if you, and this takes time, this takes years, because you need to, all this revolutionary, in a way, for some people, for some words, revolutionary way of working that is upside down compared to how they've always worked, is not something that is obvious, and so it requires time to be integrated. And when this happens, this is also going to be another part of the answer to making things more accessible. In general, we like to study, and this is why, and like people like Claudia are extremely important as a service design, because you really need to study the whole process. And you can funnel a big part towards digital, but then you need to find, and you can minimize the hardware requirements as much as possible. For example, we want to go web only. We don't want them to have native apps to interact with the government, right? Or also apps, we try to minimize the requirements as much as possible, but then there's always going to be other channels. And we don't want to treat them necessarily as second-class citizens, in the sense like you should be able to complete processes in either way.
Sure.